Florence was paralyzed. Her entire life, defined by order and safety, had been shattered by 3 chilling French words. Elle vient avec nous. Elle vient avec nous. She comes with us. She had just completed a simple act of charity helping a lost French tourist. Now, a man named Donald Duck, the intimidating presence who commanded the entire security detail, was standing over her, his eyes sharp and dangerous. She protested, frantic. She was a freelance translator. He couldn't do this. He didn't care. You are the solution to a problem that's costing me millions, he hissed. Before she could scream, his guard, Marco, moved with ruthless efficiency. Her phone and keys vanished instantly. She was shoved into a black SUV, treated not as a person to be abducted, but as a valuable asset to be secured. The rules were immediately laid down. Silence, obedience. He informed her that her next words, the ones she was about to translate, would determine the fate of others, and possibly herself. She was now a hostage translator for the Mafia, trapped in a high-end containment unit. Her first assignment was already waiting. The question for Florence was not how to escape, but what kind of blood would be on her hands when she translated the first bullet. If you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe, like the video, and tell me where you're watching from. Your support helps us to bring more interesting stories like this, and you don't want to miss it. The gallery doors seemed to swallow the light, and for a terrifying moment, Florence was paralyzed, her meticulously organized world fractured by 3 simple French words. Elle vient avec nous. She comes with us. Wait, stop. Florence found her voice, maintaining a professional firmness despite the panic seizing her chest. She spoke quickly, addressing Donald Duck directly. Sir, I'm a freelance translator. I helped a tourist. I don't know who you are, but I assure you, I have appointments. I have clients. You can't. Donald moved, closing the remaining distance between them. He was intimidating up close, his dark eyes sharp and impatient, his posture radiating non-negotiable authority. He didn't raise his voice, which only made his dismissal more potent. I know who you are, Florence Mendel. I heard your French. It's perfect, clean, and you don't panic. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly timbre, the subtle, unplaceable accent suddenly pronounced. You speak the language of a deal I need done right now. You are the solution to a problem that's costing me millions. You're working for me, Florence Mendel. Before she could form a coherent protest to mention the police or her rights, Marco, the impassive guard she had translated for moments ago, moved with shocking efficiency. Her phone and keys vanished from her handbag, secured by hands that felt more accustomed to breaking things than holding them. She was not a prisoner to be restrained, but an asset to be secured. In the car, Marco said, his voice flat. Florence was rushed into the back of a waiting black SUV. The leather smelled expensive. The windows were heavily tinted. It felt less like transportation, and more like a high-end containment unit. Donald slid in beside her, and the vehicle peeled away from the curb with a smooth, silent force, merging instantly into the Upper East Side traffic. The conversation that followed was brief, delivered without threat but with absolute finality. Donald explained nothing of the deal, nothing of his identity beyond the implied authority. The rules were simple: silence and obedience. She was to translate exactly what she heard, without elaboration, omission, or, God forbid, advice. He made it clear that her life, and the lives of those she was about to hear discussed, depended entirely on her precision. As the SUV hurtled through the maze of the city, Florence focused on the only thing she could control: the rhythmic, meticulous filing system of her own mind. The initial, crippling terror gave way to a cold, professional dread. She had been plucked from her ordinary life for a purpose. Now, her greatest fear wasn't about escaping. It was about failing the task at hand. The danger was physical, but the responsibility was moral. What is the first and most dangerous thing Donald will ask her to translate? And will she be able to keep her composure when the words she speaks could mean the difference between millions lost or lives ended? The black SUV halted with the same silent efficiency it had used to spirit Florence away, pulling into a vast, grim parking lot outside a corrugated steel structure. This was no high-end gallery. It was a windowless, fortified warehouse, exuding an air of utilitarian violence. Inside, the atmosphere was a thick coil of tension. Armed men, moving with professional quiet, manned various stations. Donald led Florence through a maze of crates to a makeshift command center, a heavy wooden table dominated by encrypted communication equipment. This was the operational hub he had spoken of. "Sit," Donald commanded, pointing to a chair opposite him. Marco handed Florence a military-grade headset, its earpiece tight and cold against her temple. "This is the line," Marco explained, gesturing to a device flickering with red status lights. "Stay focused." Donald, now wearing the same type of headset, gave her one final, searing look. "The men taken belong to me. Their return is non-negotiable." "The group on the line is called the Vipers," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "Translate every threat, every word, without your Parisian softness. Let me hear the venom." The line connected with a harsh crackle. A voice, smooth and deceptively calm, came through Florence's earpiece. It spoke French, flawless, educated, but laced with a cruel arrogance. "Ah, Donald, I see you found someone to articulate your despair. You surprise me. I am Victor. Let us begin this little exchange in the language of diplomacy, shall we? French. It allows for such nuance." The immediate insistence on French, a language Donald clearly spoke only marginally, gave Florence a chilling realization. She wasn't just a translator. She was a conduit of power, and Victor knew it. Her mastery of the language gave her, and by extension Donald, complete control over the immediate perception of the conversation. The negotiation became a brutal dance of veiled threats and raw demands. Victor described the captivity of Donald's men with sickening poetry, and Florence forced herself to render his eloquent cruelty into concise, unblinking English for Donald. She struggled internally to maintain the neutral voice of a machine, while translating sentences that spoke of betrayal, torture, and imminent death. Then came the inciting incident. "We agreed on the figure of 40 million euros for the return of your subordinates," Victor purred, the sound scraping against Florence's nerves. "But frankly, Donald, after the inconvenience of hosting them, I believe that price has risen. 50 million, and throw in the deed for the Monaco Yacht Club berth. I await your rage." Donald's posture tightened instantly. His hand, resting on the table, curled into a fist, white at the knuckles. He was ready to sever the communication violently, ready to choose war over extortion. A wave of icy clarity washed over Florence. A direct translation of that ultimatum would guarantee a breakdown. She couldn't let him. Without conscious thought, operating purely on instinct and linguistic maneuvering, she acted. Florence gripped the headset. Her voice, though still calm, took on an almost conversational tone as she translated. "He says, the current valuation of the men, though high, has been adjusted. He is proposing a final counteroffer of 50 million, but only if you see this as an opportunity for future, non-hostile dialogue." She used the French phrase, une proposition définitive, a definitive proposition, instead of the absolute ultimatum. In English, she added a subtle, pre-agreed coded phrase Donald's men listened for in any communication with the Vipers. The new terms are clearly exposed by his brazen demand. Donald's eyes snapped to hers, sharp and deadly. He knew she had manipulated the conversation and slipped in a code word, giving a signal to his perimeter team. His jaw clenched, but he waited, a terrifying silence stretching between them. She had risked everything to buy him a few seconds, waiting, heart-pounding, to see if her dangerous gamble would pay off. The terrifying silence in the warehouse was broken only by the sharp, coded message filtering through Donald's earpiece. The perimeter team had confirmation. Victor, the Viper's negotiator, was indeed operating from a location that his guards had exposed by their increased activity, exactly as Florence's subtle addition to the translation had implied. Donald's glare didn't soften, but the fury in his eyes was instantly overtaken by calculated strategy. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod to Marco. The crisis had become an opportunity. Donald spoke into the headset, his voice dangerously even. "Tell him the initial amount is secure and ready for transfer. The yacht club deed stays with me, and the future dialogue can rot in the street, but the men come home." Now, Florence, recovering from her own audacious move, translated Donald's words with clinical precision. Victor, hearing the unexpected firmness and sensing the shift in the negotiations' balance, hesitated. The advantage she had bought, coupled with Donald's tactical leverage, worked. "Très bien, Donald. You are as predictable as you are stubborn. The exchange will proceed on the original terms." Victor's voice was clipped with defeat. The communication line went dead. Florence slumped slightly in her chair, the adrenaline draining away, leaving her shaky. She had just mediated a high-stakes, life-or-death negotiation, using nothing but her linguistic skills, and she had won. The warehouse immediately cleared out. Marco and a few others moved swiftly, securing the communications gear and preparing to verify the prisoner exchange. Donald remained, standing over Florence, his presence overwhelming the small command center. He waited until they were alone, his expression unreadable. "You changed the deal," he stated, his voice a low accusation. "You added condition, you softened the tone, and you inserted a command that wasn't mine." Florence met his gaze, refusing to look away. "I bought you time, and I used the code you established to confirm his position. Had I translated his demand directly, you would have ended the call, and your men would be dead. I saved the negotiation, Donald." A terrifying, almost reluctant smile touched the corner of his mouth, gone as quickly as it appeared. He was furious at her insubordination, yet entirely captivated by her utility. "You are invaluable, mademoiselle," he conceded, the word tasting like ash on his tongue. He stepped closer, planting his hands flat on the table on either side of her, trapping her in his focus. "And now you are never leaving." That sentence, spoken without threat but with total certainty, cemented her new reality. She was no longer a temporary asset. She was a permanent fixture, protected by and beholden to the Duck crime family. Within the hour, she was transported from the functional grime of the warehouse to the absurd luxury of Donald Duck's penthouse, a sleek, secured fortress high above Central Park. It was here, in the cold, opulent silence, that she met Madame Dubois, the real niece of the lost tourist. Madame Dubois, a woman with kind, weary eyes and a perpetually worried expression, was Donald's loyal housekeeper. She led Florence to a guest suite, her hands fluttering with concern. "You must rest, chérie," Madame Dubois murmured in French, her accent thick with concern. "Donald does not choose people easily. If you are here, it is because you are needed." She paused, her eyes lingering on Florence, with a mixture of pity and warning. "Be useful, be quiet, and you will survive this place." Florence's introduction to the Duck crime family's operations was a jarring study in contrasts. By day, she sat in Donald's vast, silent penthouse study, translating documents that detailed intricate, legitimate business fronts, real estate acquisitions, high-frequency trading patents, and international import manifests. The work itself was fascinatingly complex, requiring every ounce of her linguistic precision, and the financial security that came with it was astronomical, a sudden, blinding relief compared to her old freelance anxieties. But interspersed with the corporate jargon were encrypted files hinting at the true nature of the empire, coded instructions for transfers of illicit goods, legal contracts written to deceive offshore regulators, and detailed surveillance reports. The organization was terrifyingly systematic, almost corporate in its structure, yet utterly deadly in its purpose. Florence was translating the very framework of criminality. Her internal conflict, initially a simple terror, rapidly grew more complex. Donald was ruthless, demanding, and unquestionably dangerous, yet he was meticulous in his protection of her. He trusted her with secrets that could dismantle his world. This proximity to raw, unchallenged power, combined with the lingering memory of how she had used her wit to save his men and herself, sparked an undeniable, alarming attraction. Every demanding look, from his intense gaze, like the man in the image, was a fresh shock of adrenaline. She found herself subconsciously justifying his aggression as competence, a mental gymnastics routine necessary to survive, yet damning to her old identity. One quiet afternoon, Florence found Madame Dubois dusting the ornate picture frames in the main hall. Florence offered to help Madame Dubois prepare dinner, seeking the momentary normalcy of kitchen tasks. While kneading dough, Florence ventured a question about the man who owned the gallery, Monsieur Dubois' lost uncle. Madame Dubois sighed, her hands pausing in their rhythm. "The gallery is just a shell, chérie. Donald has many beautiful shells." She looked at Florence, her kind eyes wistful. "You remind him of someone. You are precise, you are brave, and you have the language." The housekeeper spoke softly, carefully, of the past. Years ago, Donald was engaged. Her name was Sabine. She was beautiful, and she too was a translator. She helped him set up many of the French connections he uses now. Madame Dubois lowered her voice to a whisper. But the price, the violence. One night, Sabine saw something she couldn't unsee. She fled. She ran away and never looked back. A cold dread settled over Florence. She realized she wasn't just useful. She was a type, a replacement, filling a functional and emotional hole left by a woman who had seen the true darkness and chosen freedom. Florence was walking the exact same perilous path. Sabine had run when the violence became too real. The war with the Vipers was still looming. Florence now knows the price of staying, the ghost of Sabine serving as a constant warning of the inevitable fallout. Will Florence prove to Donald and herself that she is stronger than Sabine, capable of embracing the duality of this life? Or will the fear of the looming war with the Vipers finally force her to flee? Drop your thoughts below. Smash the subscribe button if you really want to know what happened next. The days following the hostage negotiation were marked by a deceptive calm. The Vipers, smarting from their tactical defeat, did not retaliate with gunfire or explosives. Instead, they initiated a cold war, a systematic campaign of financial and legal attacks designed to bleed Donald Duck's legitimate businesses dry. They targeted his shipping manifests with regulatory flags, initiated frivolous international lawsuits against his real estate holdings, and destabilized his offshore accounts through targeted media leaks. This calculated strategy immediately solidified Florence's central, indispensable role. Donald couldn't use muscle against a paper war. He needed precision, foresight, and absolute confidentiality in the face of complex international law, much of which was handled in French jurisdictions. Florence was plunged into translating sensitive, critical communications with international partners, powerful, often ruthless individuals whose alliances were necessary to stem the hemorrhaging assets. Her fluency became the pivot point of the Duck crime family's defense. She wasn't merely translating. She was identifying the weak points in Victor's legal strikes, helping to secure powerful French allies who could counter the Vipers' maneuvering on the European front. She was no longer just an asset. She had become an advisor. During long nights in the study, surrounded by projections and legal documents, Donald began to treat her as such. He stopped giving curt commands and started asking, "What is the intention here, Florence? Tell me the subtext." He trusted her linguistic instincts over the cold data provided by his analysts. Their work sessions evolved into a tense, charged partnership. He would lean across the desk, his presence filling her personal space, demanding her full, unwavering focus on the words, and in doing so, demanding her full, unwavering focus on him. The line between professional necessity and dangerous personal connection blurred completely. During one late-night session, Florence was translating a dense, coded message regarding the movement of assets across the Swiss border. Donald, his jaw tight with exhaustion and stress, reached out and subtly adjusted her headset, his thumb brushing the side of her temple. It was a fleeting, non-verbal touch, but it held a heavy charge, a moment of intense, shared purpose, and unspoken recognition that their fates were now inextricably linked. His proximity, his scent, The absolute necessity of his existence in her life was becoming a physical addiction that completely overshadowed her fading memory of normalcy. She was falling for the danger, for the man who needed her to survive. Just as the Cold War seemed to stabilize, a fresh wave of panic hit the secure communications hub. Marco, hunched over the monitoring equipment, swore sharply. He tore off his headset and rushed to Donald, speaking in a rapid, urgent Italian that Florence could only partially grasp. Donald's face went instantly cold and hard, erasing all signs of the previous tension. Marco slammed a printout onto the desk, a heavily coded message intercepted from a low-level Viper operative. Florence, straining to hear, caught the English words, 3 simultaneous hits, and then Marco repeated the chilling conclusion to Donald. The paper war is over, boss. They are hitting the gallery, the dockyard, and the Paris safe house tonight. Florence stared at the translated coordinates on the printout, realizing she had been pulled back to the brink of true violence. The intercepted message shattered the fragile peace of the penthouse. The transition from the financial Cold War back to explosive violence was immediate, requiring decisive action. Donald was a man of action, and the methodical calm he had shown during the negotiation now hardened into ruthless efficiency. Donald's command center pulsed with frenetic energy. He stood over the tactical maps, barking rapid orders in a mixture of Italian and English. Florence, translating key operational phrases into French for the Paris team, found herself the conduit for the impending carnage. She translated the orders to secure perimeter breaches, to isolate targets, and, most chillingly, the necessary authorizations for the removal of threats, a clinical euphemism for murder. She spoke the language of death, her voice flat and precise, knowing these words would lead to bodies in the street before dawn. The weight of this moral complicity crushed her. She was no longer just analyzing contracts. She was actively enabling violence, trading her conscience for survival, and a terrifying, seductive attachment to Donald. Just as the final team was mobilizing for simultaneous deployment, Donald stopped the operation cold. He dismissed Marco and the other security heads, gesturing them out of the study and leaving him alone with Florence. The silence that fell was heavy, thicker than the panic had been. He walked to his heavy, mahogany desk, where a single, thick document lay next to a gold pen. He looked utterly drained, the ruthless mask momentarily slipping to reveal the grim reality of the man who ruled by blood. "Look at this, Florence," Donald said, his voice quiet. He picked up the document. It wasn't a contract. It was a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, NDA, already signed by Donald and meticulously notarized. Attached was a document detailing a staggering financial transfer and a clean, untraceable identity package. If she signed it, she would walk away completely free, protected by a fortune, and guaranteed total anonymity. The only clause was the absolute penalty of death if she ever spoke a single word of the Duck crime family's business. Donald slid the paper and the pen across the desk to her. "I know what is about to happen tonight," he began, his accent pronounced by the strain. "I know what you have become in this room. You are too good, Florence. You are too clean. The Viper's plan, this is just the start. The violence will escalate, and I won't always be there to clean up the pieces and make it look like a legal matter." His eyes, intense and dark, bored into hers. He wasn't testing her loyalty to him. He was testing her desire for life. "You have seen too much, and now you have chosen to be a part of it. The world will hunt you if you stay, and the Vipers will target you, because you are my translator. I can buy you a clean life. Now, tonight, before the blood is spilled again. I'd rather you be free and protected than here for what's coming. Take the deal." He didn't plead. He didn't order. He simply presented the absolute truth, freedom or permanent danger. The document was a genuine escape route, a one-time offer to reclaim the orderly, solitary life she'd lost. Florence looked down at the gold pen, the promise of freedom shimmering on the contract. She felt the fierce, visceral pull of her old self, the woman who craved safety and quiet. But then she looked up at Donald Duck, the man who trusted her with the dark, complex machinery of his life. the man for whom she had risked her life hours ago. The moment of truth arrived not with a fearful shiver, but with a surge of unexpected, defiant heat. She realized with chilling clarity that the woman who wanted to sign the NDA was gone. The woman sitting here now didn't want the freedom he offered. She didn't want to leave him. Florence stared at the NDA, her reflection barely visible in the dark sheen of the penthouse window. The silence in the study was torturous, filled only by the frantic beat of her own pulse. She felt Donald's scrutiny, an intense focus that was almost a physical touch. Finally, she pushed the document away, nudging it back across the smooth mahogany surface. The gold pen clattered softly. "I won't sign it," she said, the words quiet but carrying the force of a tectonic shift. Donald's expression, previously grim and controlled, hardened. He didn't look relieved or pleased. He looked dangerous. "You misunderstand, Florence. This is not a request for loyalty. This is a final opportunity to protect yourself from a life that will destroy you. I know what I am." Sabine knew, and she ran. He pushed the NDA back toward her with the tip of his finger, his voice low and challenging. "Why are you still here, Florence? You value your freedom. Take the deal." Her resolve snapped. She rose, walking around the desk to stand opposite him. This wasn't about the contract anymore. It was about the lie of her past self and the terrifying truth of her present. "It's not about the NDA, Donald," she confessed, her voice thick with the admission she'd fought for weeks. "I could sign that and still be safe, but I can't leave. I don't want the safety it represents." She saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes, a crack in his armor she hadn't seen before. "When I was translating for you in that warehouse, when I had to lie to Victor to buy you 10 seconds, I realized something," she continued, the truth rushing out. "My old life was quiet, but it was suffocating. I didn't just save your men, I saved myself from mediocrity. I love the challenge, the danger, and I love the fact that you trust me with your life and your secrets. I'm staying because of the man who needs me here." Donald's meticulously controlled composure shattered. The intense focus that usually radiated calculation now radiated raw emotion. He moved, suddenly and swiftly, closing the distance between them, similar to the intense interaction shown in the image. He didn't touch her yet, but his presence was overwhelming. "You don't understand what you're choosing," he murmured, his accent thicker, more raw. "I let Sabine go because she only loved the idea of me. She didn't love the cost. She chose the escape. You are choosing the cage." "Then lock it," Florence whispered. His hand reached up, cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a silent tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. The controlled tension between them, built over weeks of proximity and shared secrets, finally broke. "Then you choose this life," he breathed, his eyes dark with possession. "You are mine now, and anyone who touches what's mine pays with everything." He kissed her then, a passionate, desperate acceptance of their complicated, doomed fate. It was a kiss that sealed her future, securing her position as the indispensable, protected partner of a crime boss, her new life irrevocably intertwined with secrets, power, and escalating violence. The kiss in the study had been the seal of their new covenant. Florence, having chosen the cage, immediately put on the mantle of the captor. She returned to the command center and, without hesitation, translated Donald's final, critical orders that would shut down the Viper's operation permanently. There was no ambiguity, no attempt to soften the language. She spoke the French commands for elimination and interception with a cold, terrifying efficiency. Marco, preparing his team for deployment, paused as she finished, giving her a long, appraising look. The fearful translator of days past was gone, replaced by a woman whose voice held the precise, lethal edge of a polished dagger. The change was noted. Florence was no longer a victim being protected. She was a resource being wielded. The Viper's coordinated attacks were swiftly dismantled, thanks to Donald's preemptive mobilization. But Victor, the organization's leader, refused to accept defeat. Driven by desperation, he attempted one final, personal attack. 2 days later, Donald arranged a private, unannounced meeting in a heavily secured downtown safe room to finalize the cleanup logistics with an Italian associate. Florence, as always, was present, translating the nuanced legal details of asset seizure. The room was sterile, the security supposedly impenetrable. Midway through the discussion, Florence's keen ear, sharpened by weeks of analyzing coded messages and surveillance reports, registered a sequence of muffled clicks from the ventilation system that did not match the typical ambient noise. She instantly recalled a detail from a security manifest she had translated days ago, the one for this very room, detailing a compromised acoustic panel during a recent retrofit. Without waiting for confirmation, Florence saw a flicker of movement near the ceiling vent. She reacted instantly, shouting the only warning she knew Donald's closest guard, Marco, would immediately understand. Marco! Sous la grille maintenant! Il est exposé! Marco! Under the grill now! He is exposed! She didn't shout gun or ambush. She used the tactical, military French that signaled an immediate direct threat to a key position. Marco, already vigilant, reacted to the urgent French command, tackling Donald just as the silenced muzzle of a rifle poked through the panel. The bullet harmlessly struck the concrete where Donald's head had been seconds before. The immediate, violent response from Donald's security team was deafening, ending Victor's desperate gambit within seconds. Donald was saved, but the incident left Florence deeply shaken. Her action was instinctive, but the blood now splattered on the immaculate carpet was a tangible link to her participation. She was no longer just a translator. She was a combatant. Later, back in the penthouse, Donald looked at her from his position on the edge of the bed, his expression a mixture of awe and finality. He was unharmed, but his control had been utterly stripped away by the near-death experience. "You saved me, Sherry," he stated, his voice heavy. "Twice now. You've stood between me and death. The world knows now. The Vipers know. There is no going back. You are mine." The simplicity of his statement was the final piece of the puzzle. Her old life was gone, not just because she chose this one, but because this one had publicly claimed her. Settling into her new identity as his indispensable, protected partner, Florence opened her old personal laptop, a relic of her former freelance life, to delete some archived files. An unread message sat in her forgotten inbox. The sender was an email address she didn't recognize, but the subject line was chillingly familiar. Sabine. The body contained only 6 words. "Flee. They will use you until you break." Florence stared at the warning from the ghost of Donald's past for a long minute, then, with a trembling finger, hit delete, erasing the message but not the doubt. Will Sabine's warning resurface as a prophecy of Florence's inevitable downfall? Or has Florence truly chosen and survived her way into the heart of the Duck crime family, proving herself stronger than the woman who ran? Drop your comment and reply with part 2 to get the conclusion of the story. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.